Hello, faithful, and welcome to the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion. Only smart takes, no clickbait. And today we're going to be talking quickly about Jennings returning to practice. The big news, obviously, about Christian McCaffrey's calf and his availability for the season opener at Seattle. And then we're going to dive right into Week 1's opening game in the Pacific Northwest, what I'm going to be looking for from the 49ers on offense and defense, diving into how Seattle can give the 49ers some problems, and a prediction for the Week 1 game. So let's jump right into it, and not to bury the lead or diminish anything about what's going on with Christian McCaffrey, but it was good to see that Jennings is back at practice. Another calf issue, an ailment that is hopefully or probably farther along than whatever Christian McCaffrey is dealing with. And the contract got resolved as well for Juwan. So back at practice, not a coincidence that he also got $3 million more in incentives. The question is this the same? Are these the same incentives that he previously had for the 2025 season? Meaning if he plays 50% of the snaps this season, he gets a $1.5 million bonus or incentive, escalator, whatever you want to call it. If he reaches 60 receptions, 600 yards, or 6 touchdowns, he gets about $667,000 for each one of those milestones. It was also reported, I saw on social media, which could have been a total load of crap, but that Jennings was offered a long-term extension. That part was probably true, but what I saw reported was 3 years, $42 million, so $14 million per, which for me would be a little high. I would not offer him anything unless Brandon Ayuk suffers some sort of a setback from the ACL, or he's going to be done for the year, or they make the decision during the season that they're going to trade Ayuk after the season. I'm not even sure what the salary cap implications are for that, how much dead money would be on the books, but giving, $14 million a year, again, that's not $14 million per year on the cap. It would be less than 14 for the first year of the extension, then obviously going up. I'm sure there would be some void years built in on the back end to make it a little bit more manageable. But the calf injury is going to be interesting as he's coming off of that. Obviously not 100%, but important now when we talk about Christian McCaffrey, that Jennings will be in the lineup starting, probably play around 50% of the snaps as they ease him back per Kyle Shanahan. I'm guessing at the 50% number. I'm just making it a nice round, even midway point type of a number. But the incentives now with Jennings being eased back in for at least, say, the first week or two, then you have Demarcus Robinson back week 4, then you have Brandon Ayuk back, let's say, in week 6 or 7. The 50% of snaps is probably the best one of these, incentive marks, the old incentive marks for him to hit. Say he plays 50% of the snaps this game, more so game 2, more so game 3. And then when Robinson comes back, Jennings is still the starter, but that could eat into some of his snaps. And of course, when Ayuk comes back, Ayuk's not going to be coming back, walking into the starting lineup, or hopefully running into the starting lineup. I highly doubt. So Jennings, we'll see, as of this recording on Friday night, I don't know what those new $3 million worth of incentives are. I hope he gets them. Why not? The more the merrier for everybody. But both sides are now happy. And if the Niners can retain Juwan long-term at a decent number, and or Colton McKivitz, because Kyle came out and said that he wants both players here long-term, just not sure if it's going to work out financially. Colton McKivitz is going to get at least twice as much as what the Niners are willing to pay him. And if Jennings gets anywhere near $20 million, I highly doubt that. If the Niners are going to go around 14 or 15, I guess you can stomach it. But if they can get him for maybe 11 or 12, and at this point, it's not my money. We're going to mince, $2.5 million a year, whether it's, a signing bonus or whatever his AAV is. Highly doubtful that Jennings or McKivitz is here for the long term. but we'll see how it plays out for each one of those players week 1 and beyond. So now let's get back 5 minutes into the podcast. We'll talk about Christian McCaffrey's calf. Full practice on Wednesday, limited participant Thursday, suited up, worked over to the side, but did not practice on Friday. He met with the media. I'm going to share some of the things that he said, but yesterday, this sent Niner fans online into an absolute tizzy to the point where it felt like they needed, or we all needed, although I'm a little bit more level-headed, I think, seemed like they needed a group therapy session. Season's over. We're cooked. Cut McCaffrey. He's washed. Garbage. Bad season. Another 2024 season coming. There was obviously some people that were saying, well, it's probably minor, not a big deal, just a precaution given his injury history. But the majority of fans, probably say in the 70% plus range, were doom and gloom. And you can understand it based on coming off of 2024, based on McCaffrey's 2024, McCaffrey's injury history overall when you include with Carolina. But there is no need, and I was thinking about doing, the podcast yesterday, or at least some thoughts about McCaffrey's calf, but I didn't have any information. Like, to me, to talk or pontificate about if McCaffrey's going to play or if not, when there was no information yesterday. There's more information today, but it still is if McCaffrey is going to play or not. Kyle says questionable. McCaffrey says he's ready to go. But for Kyle's press conference, didn't say much. I think it was only about 5 minutes that he spoke. And his quote was, there's questionable concern about McCaffrey's calf. Questionable deal with the calf was the other quote. And he kept saying, I'm not going to say anything about McCaffrey or any other injuries, although he did say that Yetur Gross-Matos looked good. He's a full go for the game. So it's really McCaffrey's injury that Shanahan was not talking about. Now, per McCaffrey, spoke with reporters today after practice, which he did not participate in. Quote, unfortunately, from Christian, when you have an injury history that I have, sometimes when you don't practice, things get blown out of proportion. But like I said, I feel great. Next quote, I felt like it was a smart thing to do to not finish practice because I've been there before and I've been my own worst enemy in situations like that. I'm proud of myself that I did not practice. All right. Still sounds similar to the week leading up to the opening game last season, the Niners opening up Monday night, hosting the Jets. McCaffrey saying he was going to play. Even Kyle Shanahan said if there was a playoff game this week, he would play. Now, a playoff game. Now, just like Dre Greenlaw in the Super Bowl, he had a calf issue the majority of the 2023 season. It obviously popped when he was bouncing on the sideline, running back onto the field. So, yes, if the urgency of a playoff game with whatever the diagnostic test showed, if any at that point, for McCaffrey, and I guess they probably did give him an MRI or some sort of imaging before the Jet game, which is why he was put on IR. I forget if he was put on IR a couple hours before the Jet game or just was ruled out. Don't quote me on that. I'm not sure, but we obviously know he didn't play until after the bye. So he was out for the first, 8-ish weeks. What is Kyle going to say? What is McCaffrey going to say? Is he going to say he said something like, I'm not allowed to go into the injury or what was said during practice, something like that. Shanahan, a little bit of gamesmanship either way, that McCaffrey's questionable. McCaffrey, more confident. Obviously, he's more confident in his body than probably the medical staff or Kyle or John or anybody else is, given the injury concern in the same part of the body. I think what's fair for all of us, right, is just to be cautious about it. Now, I'm in 2 fantasy leagues. I had the 6th pick in one league, and I picked him. I would love to know from a fantasy perspective if he's going to play. We're probably not going to know until inactives, 90 minutes before kickoff. So for me, it's going to be about 2:30 Eastern time. But my fantasy team just pales in comparison to what's best for Christian, what's best for the Niners, and what San Francisco's actually going to do. because it has a ripple effect on the roster. Jordan James, rookie running back out of Oregon, he's doubtful with, the fractured finger still. So they're going to have to, you know what, actually, we might actually know the night before if the Niners activate Sincere McCormick and elevate him from the practice squad, not activate, but elevate him as one of their 2 elevations, then that probably doesn't look so good for McCaffrey. That could still be a little bit of gamesmanship to have 4 running backs active, or they elevate McCormick and keep him inactive. So it's still McCaffrey, Brian Robinson, and Isaac Guerendo. But let's just go into this with a little bit of caution. I'm going to go into why McCaffrey not playing is not the end of the world here with San Francisco, as we dive into kind of the preview with San Francisco and Seattle. I'm leaning more towards precaution, just being smart, and that McCaffrey will be playing. Now, with this popping up Thursday, essentially 3 days before playing Seattle, does that limit his touches? God, I'd hope so, right? But, Shanahan didn't have that mindset. First game back against Tampa coming off a bye, he had the lion's share of the carries, as he did the following week against Seattle and then Green Bay. There was no rest for the weary. It's not like McCaffrey had 25 carries. He was still in the high teens for that first game against Tampa. And I'm going to go over that, as well. But you would think, Shanahan and McCaffrey's got the say too about if he wants to come in or out, or he has a say. His words of it was a smart thing to do. I'm proud that I did not practice because I would have done that in years past. Maybe he'd be more prone to ceding some touches to Robinson or Guerendo if he feels like he is not 100%. We'll see. I'm leaning, again, I'm not an optimistic person. I wouldn't say I'm a pessimist either. I'm somewhere in the middle, but I think this is a blown out of proportion scenario. But I do think McCaffrey will not have the full workload that he might have had if the calf didn't pop up. And I'm going to talk about why that's actually not a bad thing going into week 1. So let's dive into Niners, Seahawks, 4 o'clock West Coast, 1 o'clock or 1:05 specifically, or 4 o'clock East Coast, 1:05 Eastern time. Niners are a 2.5-point favorite. I'm not sure how that's going to move with the McCaffrey news, 43.5 over under. Here's what I'm looking for offensively. Let's start with Jennings because we talked about him at the jump. How much is he going to play? And when he comes out, who's wide receiver 2? In 2 wide receiver sets, when he is not in, is it going to be Marquez Valdez-Scantling? Is it going to be Russell Gage? Is it going to be Robbie Chosen? Kyle said there's going to be 5 active receivers, which is basically the target number for any game this season. It's going to be Pearsall. It's going to be JJ. It's going to be Sky Moore for punt kick returns and some receiver duty. Valdez-Scantling is on the active roster. He will be one, and it's going to be Gage or Robbie Chosen. Jordan Watkins, the rookie out of Ole Miss, he's doubtful as well, along with Jordan James with the ankle. He practiced. He will not be playing. And I said in the previous podcast, and if you did not listen or watch, but if you're aboard for this one, glad to have you aboard. Hopefully we can keep you around and keep you entertained and informed. The Niners' offensive stable of receivers is better now than it was at the beginning of training camp. We knew Ayuk wasn't going to play. We knew Demarcus Robinson was more than likely going to be suspended for 3 games. To bring in Sky Moore over Jacob Cowing, to me, that's an upgrade. More experienced player. We have no idea what Jacob Cowing's is going to be, right? People may not like Sky Moore, and that's fine. I'm not saying he's any great shakes, but he's an experienced, proven player. Yeah, had, low 20s in receptions his first 2 years with the Chiefs under Andy Reid and did not play at all last season, went on IR in October. But more of a known quantity than Jacob Cowing. Built the same way, same size, same speed. More experienced as a punt returner than Jacob Cowing. Not saying he's good or great at it, or even good, but more experienced. Jordan Watkins, he would be buried on the depth chart anyway. He probably would have been inactive at Seattle, and they probably would have called up a Gage or a Robbie Chosen anyway. Do you want 2 really young players, a second-year player and a rookie, Week 1 at Seattle, when you're dealing with issues at receiver, no Ayuk, no Robinson, Jennings probably playing half the snaps, and McCaffrey being questionable if he plays, probably going to be limited to some degree. Sit Watkins' ass down. Jacob Cowing, it's a shame he's on IR. Sit his ass down. Bring in more experienced players to help balance out maybe what the Niners are going to be lacking if McCaffrey doesn't go or if he doesn't go at 100%. I am more, I don't know if I want to say excited, because you're always excited about young players, rookies, etc., but I'm more comfortable with the 5 they're going to roll out on Sunday than what the 5 could have been if everybody was healthy at the start of camp and throughout, because that means Gage is probably a practice squad player. Chosen isn't on the roster, maybe not the practice squad. Valdez-Scantling, probably not on the roster, or definitely not on the roster, and maybe not even on the practice squad. And you'd be rolling with younger players that I would not have as much confidence in or be comfortable with. And again, Sky Moore, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Russell Gage, Robbie Chosen, these are not anybody that you're going to start in fantasy unless you are absolutely desperate. But they are proven, more experienced options than the alternative. Now, what else am I looking for? The running game, with or without McCaffrey, get to 30-plus rushes, please. Now, last season, the Niners split with Seattle, right? They won up in Seattle. Guerendo breaking the game open sort of with that big run at the end of the game. Said he slid down, should have scored to make it a 2-possession game. Devin Witherspoon caught him from behind. Thankfully, Kyle Juszczyk scored a couple plays later. Otherwise, a field goal would have made it, I believe, an 8-point game and a 1-score game, giving the ball back to Seattle. But last season at Seattle, guys, without McCaffrey, the Niners ran it 33 times for 228 yards and 1 touchdown. Guerendo went 10 for 99, big 50 or 60-yard run at the end. Jordan Mason, 9 for 73. Patrick Taylor, 5 for 16. Debo, 4 for 15. Those are the running backs. Brock might have had a scramble or two to get to the 33. Won that game by 12. A couple weeks later, Seattle upsets the Niners in Santa Clara, 20-17. The Niners ran it 27 times for 131 yards and 1 touchdown. McCaffrey had most of the carries there. I'm going to go into that in a second. Now, Seattle, I'm sure there were defensive adjustments, right? You get ripped up and their hearts just ripped out of their chests, 33 for 228 and a touchdown. Yes, I'm sure Seattle had some defensive adjustments so the Niners didn't run all over them again. Only 6 fewer rushes, right? 33-27. It's not like they ran it under 20 times, but the magic numbers for the Niners and Kyle and Brock is running it over 30 times and passing it under 30 times. I've been saying this for a couple years. Volume of runs is almost as important as productivity of runs. When you get that intersection of productivity and volume, that's when you can make magic happen in this offense. But Kyle, we've watched all the games, guys. He gets away from the run when he shouldn't, gets a little bit too pass happy. And it's usually in big games. The Super Bowls come to mind, both of them against the Chiefs. This is a game with or without McCaffrey. And they should be asking more of Purdy, not because of the contract, but because he is your franchise quarterback, right? He's going to be without 2 weapons in Ayuk and Demarcus Robinson, maybe 3 with McCaffrey. And I don't want to hear, well, if they lose the game, it's because McCaffrey was hurt or Ayuk and Robinson. Brock won games without McCaffrey and Ayuk last season, right? One of the big ones was Dallas right before the bye. Got up big on Dallas and held on, even though Nick Sorensen was trying to give that away with awful defensive play calling. But they won games last year, and they probably should have won more because they had a whole bunch of 1-score games that did not go their way, whether it was special teams or defense. Nick Sorensen, Jake Moody, take your pick. Kyle was still putting up points. The defense was a sieve, especially against the run. But they've proven that they can run on Seattle. They did it last year, didn't do it quite as well as at home. And everybody's going to be amped, right? The 12th man I'm not sure what the weather is going to be, this far out, a couple days out yet. But if you could run it 33 times without McCaffrey and you can divvy up runs 10 to Guerendo, 9 for Mason, and 5 for Taylor, if McCaffrey doesn't play, don't tell me you can't do that. You can't platoon backs. Robinson, per Kyle, doesn't know the entire offense, but knows the game plan against Seattle. So he'll get the lion's share of the carries, but it shouldn't be the Brian Robinson show. He can catch balls out of the backfield, but that's something that Guerendo has shown that he can do as well. And if Sincere McCormack is in, then I would love to see some sort of split of Robinson getting 15-ish carries, Guerendo getting around 10, and McCormack getting around 5. And then, of course, Purdy will probably have 2 or 3 plus scrambles that'll account for runs. That's how you get to 30 plus. I don't want to see Robinson over 20, Guerendo maybe at 6 or 7, and McCormack at 2 or 3. You can do that and the math works, but platooning backs doesn't hurt. I mean, the kickoff game last night, yes, Jalen Hurts had 14 carries as a quarterback, but Barkley went for 18. A.J. Dillon had 3 until he got hurt. I'm sorry, Will Shipley had 3 until he got hurt. A.J. Dillon came in and had 3, and obviously the lightning strike or the lightning warning, everyone had to go in. There was no scoring after that. I think threw the offenses off a little bit. But even with Barkley, the offensive, player of the year, they're giving more runs to backups than I think Kyle would if McCaffrey was healthy. McCaffrey's 3 games back last year started out at Tampa, 13 for 39. Debo had 3 carries for 14, Mason 1 for 5, Guerendo 1 for 0. So McCaffrey 13 carries, any other running back type player 5. Seattle, McCaffrey went 19 for 79, Mason 2 for 13, Debo 1 for -1. McCaffrey 19 rushes, any other running back-ish type player 3. Come on. And then at Green Bay, even though that game got out of hand pretty quickly, it was McCaffrey 11 for 31, Mason 3 for 8. I mentioned, the breakdown of what I would like to see, but if McCaffrey plays, then McCaffrey for 15, Robinson for 10, Guerendo for 5, Purdy for 2 or 3 with scrambles. That's what I would like to see. The strength of Seattle is obviously the secondary, so pound away at the ground, right? Kyle is happy when he is dictating what he wants to do. The ground game, obviously, for any team, sets up play action, sets up moving the pocket, bootlegs, misdirections. It opens up the offense. It opens up anybody's offense, right? Any team, any offensive coordinator. Kyle, sometimes he'll say down and distance dictates getting away from the run. Sure, if it's, 2nd and 2 when you get a holding call, now you're 2nd and 12, you're probably going to try to pass it on 2nd down, maybe get 6 or 7 of that back or 8 or more, make a more manageable 3rd down. But Kyle, as we've seen, gets away from the run and he gets too enamored with McCaffrey. That's why if he doesn't play this game, it's not the end of the world. They've proven that they can beat Seattle without McCaffrey. That's the one game out of the 2 where they actually did beat Seattle was without McCaffrey. And you have very capable running backs in Robinson and Guerendo. And Sincere McCormack had a handful of carries, started a couple games for the Raiders last year. Should he get elevated? But let's not get there quite yet in terms of elevations and predictions. Offensively, I'm looking at, is Brock going to get back to playing point guard? Is he going to get back to being, the Chris Paul of the offense? Or is he going to feel the need to push more, take more chances? He's been on record saying this offseason that he wants to play within the structure of the offense. That's when he had a more breakout. Obviously, 2023 was totally different than last year, given the health situation. But there's still weapons. The offense needs to run through Kittle, especially if McCaffrey's not there. Kittle's a mismatch for anyone they're going to put on him. Feed him more often. Obviously, running the ball is going to help Brock. No Ayuk, no Robinson. Jennings, somewhat limited. We've heard a lot in training camp that Brock's got a good connection with Pearsall. It should be in no order. Kittle, Pearsall. Then if you're going to come into obviously a Jennings, if Russell Gage is activated, or Valdez Scantling or Robbie Chosen, there would be your not even tertiary option, but your fourth, type of option in the passing game. Get backup tight ends involved, right? Luke Farrell, I know you're a blocking tight end. Jake Tonjes will be active. He's got some hands, not super fast, but a good route runner. Get more diversity in the passing game. I would love to see a box score, obviously with the Niners win, but that 10 players, caught balls for San Francisco, getting, say, all 3 running backs involved, getting Juice involved, 2 tight ends, 3, let's get crazy, 5, all 5 wide receivers having, receptions. Usually a Niner box score is like heavy on the first 3, and then maybe there's 3 other players, maybe 4 getting receptions. You guys know what I'm talking about. You watch the games, you check out the box scores, spread it around like a true point guard. Now, defensively, what am I looking for? Biggest one really is, how will the D-line look? I mean, you have Mykel Williams coming off of injury with the knee sprain, was out since before the first preseason game. CJ West, rookie D tackles, coming off a knee sprain. Kalia Davis came off a knee sprain, but I think he played in the last preseason game. Yetur Gross-Matos is coming off of PUP. So while the defensive line has a nice mix of veterans between Bosa and Huff and Yetur and Jordan Elliott defensive tackle, then you're getting into the youth of Mykel Williams and the 2 rookies at D tackle. I don't think they're going to elevate an Evan Anderson. I think Jordan Jefferson's going to be an inactive, signed off of waivers from the Jacksonville Jaguars. And we'll see how many that they keep active on the D-line. But how is that D-line going to look? 1, from a health standpoint. 2, from an inexperience. 1, they're rookies. 2, they haven't played a lot, some of these rookies, in the preseason because of injury. And then 3, productivity. What is Saleh going to do? How is he going to mix, these young players and these veterans, mesh them together to stop the run? Because Seattle's been running the ball really well in preseason, for whatever that's worth, and then getting after Darnold and making him uncomfortable. I think the run D needs to keep Seattle under 100 yards. That'll put more pressure on the passing game and Sam Darnold. Last season at Seattle, the Niners held the Seahawks to 20 rushes for 52 yards and a touchdown. At San Francisco, where the Seahawks got the win, they were again under 100 yards, but 23 for 94 yards and 2 touchdowns. Better success, just over 4 yards to carry versus about 2.5 yards to carry in the game up in Seattle. Another rookie let's talk about, we're talking about the secondary, is Upton Stout, rookie cornerback. Is he ready to start at nickelback? He's had a calf issue. He hasn't played in any preseason games, been eased back the last couple weeks into practices. Is he going to start at nickel? And you're going to pull Chase Lucas, who had a strong camp and strong preseason games? I'm not at the practices, so I'll take the word of the coaches, especially Robert Saleh, in terms of how Upton Stout's looking and who gives him the best chance in the slot. Because I don't know how much Demo's going to move, if he's going to shadow Jackson Smith and Jigba, because he lines up quite a bit in the slot offensively. But is Stout ready? Another rookie, tough place to play, loud. It might not be as loud on offense for Seattle as when the Niners are on offense, but difficult week 1 place and assignment, especially if he's going to draw Jackson Smith into his area quite a bit. And again, how good Chase Lucas looked. It's not like Lucas and Upton Stout looked equally as good, but they're going to give Upton the nod, not because he's a rookie, but because he showed a little bit more promise. It's Chase has looked really good, and Upton Stout hasn't played that much, right? Is that a liability going into week 1? I don't know. We'll see. How many 3 safety looks are the Niners going to give? Now, Kyle said that they've made the decision of who's starting between Jason Pinnock, Jair Brown, and Marquise Siegel. Ciaran Neal can play both safety and corner. He will be active. He's listed as a defensive back, just like Demo is. But he has a better chance of playing some safety initially than cornerless. Anybody gets hurt. But we'll see if there's any 3 safety alignments that Saleh unveils. And can Saleh rattle Darnold? The answer, I think, is yes. It's how much is he going to be rattled? Sam Darnold picked the Niners apart last year in Minnesota. Again, Nick Sorensen, defense. He had George Odom covering, Justin Jefferson. He had him kind of bracketed, but it was 2 safeties on Justin Jefferson. Did not make any sense. That long bomb from Minnesota's own end zone that Justin Jefferson, I believe, scored on. Absolutely ridiculous. Make Sam Darnold beat you, right? And now let's talk Seattle a little bit. What Darnold's going to play? What Darnold is going to show up not only for week 1, but the whole season in Seattle. Now, Clint Kubiak is the offensive coordinator, has worked under Kyle Shanahan. You're going to see a lot of similar things that Seattle's going to do than to what the Niners do. Maybe the window dressings a little bit differently, but fundamentally a similar type of offense coming off of the Shanahan tree. But is it going to be the Darnold that played for Minnesota in weeks 1 through 17, or the one that shit the bed week 18 against Detroit and then went to Los Angeles and lost to the Rams in another offensive clunker as the playoffs began last or this past January? Seattle, as we know, has no more DK Metcalf, who's in Pittsburgh. Tyler Lockett's in Tennessee. So behind Jackson Smith and Jigba, there's Cooper Kupp and not much else. At least not much that Jake Bobo has excited. Is that going to get you? There's a rookie that's going to be getting some playing time, but not dangerous weapons. And Cooper Kupp, now I drafted him in both of my fantasy leagues late because I think, at a full point per reception, even this week, I mean, I think he might be a pretty decent play, but he is not the Cooper Kupp of 4 years ago or however many years when he won the Triple Crown and was Super Bowl MVP. Can the secondary hold up? Can Saleh disguise any looks in the secondary? But can Demo, Renardo Green, I guess Upton Stout, let's say, and any other backup corners or safeties, whoever's going to draw tight ends, etc., can they give Darnold some different looks, have him seeing ghosts, and rattle him? The Seattle offensive skill players are different and not as talented as Minnesota. The offensive line for Seattle is not as good as Minnesota's. The defense might be on par. Minnesota's defense was much more aggressive than what Mike Macdonald may run. But I'm curious to see how Sam Darnold looks. And even Seattle's hedging their bets, man. Like he's on a 2 or 3 year deal, but they can get out of it after this year if he doesn't perform well with minimal financial repercussions. Again, Seattle ran the ball well in the preseason. Are they going to make a commitment behind Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet to gash the Niners on the ground? If I was Seattle, I'd test the Niners run defense. Why not, right? It was bad last season. You're bringing in rookies. New defensive coordinator, although it's the old defensive coordinator, Robert Saleh, a good defensive mind, they should be testing the Niners' run defense early and often. Is that going to play in the Niners' hands? I don't know, or exploit a weakness. We will see on Sunday. The pass rush behind Boye Mafe and Derek Hall, they each had 6 or more sacks last season. They brought DeMarcus Lawrence in. He hasn't had more than 6 sacks, since 2020. But they have players that can get after the passer. Trent Williams and Colton McKivitz. I'm not going to say they have their work cut out for them. This isn't Green Bay with Micah Parsons and Rashawn Gary or Pittsburgh with Highsmith and TJ Watt, but they can come in numbers. And Mike Macdonald is very good at sending timely blitzes, overloading sides of the line, and giving Brock Purdy issues. At least he did with the Ravens that Christmas night game in 2023. But Brock has had some success throwing the ball against this secondary, and the secondary is the strength of the team, right? How much man is Mike Macdonald going to play with Witherspoon and Reek Woolen as your outside corners? Then you're bringing in, probably Josh Jobe as your third, nickel corner, and then at safety, Kobe Bryant and Julian Love. The strength of Seattle is the secondary, but Brock has, like I said, has played very well against Seattle the past several years, and last year as well. Brock didn't cost them that game against Seattle. Again, the defense kind of fell apart. And that was the game where Nick Bosa got hurt, I believe. And Seattle's approach offensively and the Niners' approach defensively shifted. And the Niners were playing on roller skates on their heels, and Seattle was playing much better in the fourth quarter than they did in the previous 3 quarters when Bosa was playing. My prediction. So let's just talk about it. Now, the Niners have won the last 3 games in Seattle. The last time a team has won more than 3 straight games in Seattle, you had to go back to the early 90s, the Raiders before realignment, When the Raiders and Seahawks were in the AFC West, the Raiders won 5 straight from 1990 to 1994. So the Niners are looking to keep pace and win their 4th straight. Talked about this earlier. If there is no McCaffrey, and we know there's going to be no Ayuk, the first game last year was that Cowboy game before the bye, a 30-24 win. So the Niners have shown that they can beat a quality team without both of those players on the field. The next week, bye. Then McCaffrey was back against Tampa, won that game. Then the following week is when Seattle came to Santa Clara and knocked the Niners off by 3. Niners went 1-4 to end the season once McCaffrey went out again, but they did average 23.8 points a game. Now, they had a game against the Rams. They lost 12-6. They only put 10 points up against the Packers, but they wound up putting 30 or close to 30 up on the Lions, 24 up on Arizona the last week of the season. Averaged close to 24 points a game, even without McCaffrey in the lineup those last 5. And obviously you're missing Brandon Ayuk since the Kansas City game in October. Shanahan's going to be able to scheme points. Last year's losses of 1-score games were more the result of some special teams, mainly the Rams game early on, but more so the defense not being able to hold a lead or keep teams out of the end zone and having them to settle for 3. I think it was some crazy stat where once teams got into the red zone against San Francisco last season, they were scoring touchdowns more than 65% of the time. That's ridiculous. That's shit. It's terrible. If Robert Saleh can shave 20 percentage points off of that, that would be a huge, that's probably 2 or 3 more wins right there just from doing that. Now, I have no say in who's sitting and being active or inactive, but if there is any doubt that something can be tweaked for Christian, I would sit him the first 2 weeks of the season. Potentially losing to Seattle isn't the worst thing in the world, although if they do, you can guarantee Twitter, Reddit, social media, fans are going to be in an uproar. But I would sit him. You got at New Orleans the next week, and that team should be an absolute mess, and the Niners should be able to handle them pretty easily and have him come back for week 3, the home opener against Arizona. If there is any sort of lingering doubt in Christian's mind, although he's going to push to play no matter what, but in the medical staff or Kyle's mind, it doesn't hurt. I don't think it's going to hurt them immensely to sit him. Again, last season, they did have Ayuk at Seattle. Didn't have him. Oh, no, they did not have him the first or second time. I might be wrong that I have to check the schedule. I apologize. But no McCaffrey. The first time against Seattle, they win the game. Spread the ball around. 10 rushes, 9 rushes to different running backs. They can do that. I'm fine with that. And I think it's a very winnable game without McCaffrey playing. Now, for whatever this is worth, I'm going to guess the inactives. I think the inactives are going to be, I said Jordan Watkins, inactive. Drew Moss on the offensive line, inactive. Austin Pleasance on the O-line, inactive, which means Spencer Burford will be the swing tackle. Matt Hennessy will back up Jake Brendel at center, and Connor Colby will be the backup at the 2 guard spots. Jordan James is not going to play. I think Robert Beal on the defensive line is inactive, and I think Jordan Jefferson, as I mentioned earlier, signing about 2 weeks ago or less than 2 weeks ago from the Jacksonville Jaguars, will not be active just yet. In addition to McCaffrey, if he does not play, which means practice squad call-ups, if McCaffrey plays, would potentially be 2 wide receivers. It could be Russell Gage and Robbie Chosen, or if McCaffrey doesn't play, one of those receivers and running back Sincere McCormick, who last year for the Raiders, 39 rushes for 183 yards, a 4.7 average. Receiving, he went 7 receptions for 29 yards. Now, prediction time. I said a couple months ago when the season came out that the Niners are going to drop this game at home. There's a lot of question marks. My thinking at the time was there was a lot of question marks on the defense, young players. You have Ayuk injured. You have Robinson with this, faced with a suspension, not coming back until week 4. A lot of moving parts, at least on defense, that are going to need to gel. This defense is going to be better week 4 than they are week 1. Week 8, better than they are week 4. Better week 12 than week 8. You guys get it, right? And there is the possibility that this defense gels and has strong performances like the Eagles defense did last year with rookies, bringing in new players, bringing in a new defensive coordinator, which is the path that the Niners took this offseason, at least defensively, the way they let go of a lot of veterans and reloaded with some young talent and bringing in an old hand in Saleh at defensive coordinator. That was my thinking at the time, that the Niners were going to drop this game. And my thinking has not changed. Seattle's going to win this game 23-20. I'm saying this for 2 reasons. The first reason is I'm not going back on the pick that I made earlier in the season or earlier in the offseason. Nothing has changed for me for San Francisco when I made that prediction. Nothing has changed, right? Ayuk still hurt. Robinson still suspended. Now McCaffrey's a little iffy. Now Jennings is iffy. You still have rookies. You still have new players learning the defense. Seattle doesn't scare me. That's why I said 23-20. I don't think it's a blowout by any means. And Sam Darnold can be rattled. Sam Darnold could give the game away, can just crap all over himself. I think Purdy's going to play a very efficient game, right? I don't think this is a Seattle winning it on, the last play of the game, a field goal to win it. I think it'll be a pretty close game throughout, perhaps a back and forth game, right around the over-under of 43.5. But nothing has changed for me since I made this prediction. All my thoughts about why this was going to be a difficult week 1. I think the Niners, when fully healthy, have the better roster than Seattle. I think given who the Niners are missing and could be missing, McCaffrey. Now, if McCaffrey plays, does it change my prediction? No, because when I made that prediction, McCaffrey was healthy, right? There was still other things going on the roster, youth, etc., that I just didn't feel good about this game. Like I've said before, I'm PTSD'd from the Legion of Boom, all those consecutive games that the Niners dropped in Seattle before Shanahan was the head coach, even struggling there, the first couple of years before the Niners kind of found their groove in 2019 and beyond. And the second reason, if you want to say this is more important, that I'm picking Seattle to win this game, I've picked Seattle the last 3 years to win those home games, and they've lost them. So yes, I am superstitious. There's no empirical evidence or anything data-wise that I can point to that says me picking against the Niners will help them win this game. But I am superstitious. It is a trend. It's 3 in a row that I've picked against San Francisco the past 3 years going to Seattle. So I'm going to stick with the trend in the hopes that, again, a lot of us are superstitious to certain degrees, in the hopes that that it helps the Niners in some weird mystical way get that week 1 win, regardless of who lines up as the starting running back when 4:05 Eastern Standard Time hits and we are back to NFL football for the San Francisco 49ers. So between now and then, I want to thank you guys for listening, to make us a part of your listening and watching routine. Hope you enjoyed the kickoff game last night. Hope you're enjoying, if you are watching as I'm recording, the Chiefs and Chargers on YouTube. Thank God it's free. They don't have to sign up for anything for that, because that would be ridiculous. College football on Saturday, and then a whole slate of games, and obviously the one that we will be most interested in Seattle. Like I said, Niners, I have them falling 23-20. Doing this for 2 totally separate reasons, and I'm hoping that my backward logic works in the 49ers' favor. So guys, between now and we speak again, which will be maybe Sunday night as a rapid reaction type of recap, or probably more likely on Monday, recapping the game, what went right, what went wrong. Between now and then, guys, everyone stay happy, healthy, and safe. We will talk soon. Take care.